So 2 minutes past 10, let's get this show on the road then. Welcome to our webinar on upgrading and be successful in your upgrade to Windows 11 now that there's only 1 year left. And with me today I have my dear colleague Niklas Ahlberg. Niklas?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for being here. And I have to say, I've always enjoyed Windows 10. It's been a really good and stable operating system. So it's sad to see it go, but I do actually like Windows 11 even more. So yeah, good times ahead, I guess.
Yeah, and with us we have Olof Norman as well, who will be conducting and keeping an eye on the Q&A and making sure everyone gets answers to their questions as well. So let's start with this, right? The short agenda, a little bit of retrospective where we are, Windows 11 upgrade, and what's next with Windows 11 24H2, of course, it's been newly released as well. So the magic number is October 14, 2025. The funny thing is that we have many releases of Windows 10. But if you remember, we haven't had any service packs. We have had releases instead. But if we actually sum up everything, it's still 5 plus 5 years of support, basically. So it's still 10 years of existence of Windows 10 is the same we had with previous operating systems. Different flavors, different builds, different challenges, and a lot of changes over the years. But still kind of the same cadence anyway, right? But again, we have 1 year left, and that's the date when the last of your Windows 10 device should have been moved over to Windows 11 as well. So it's if you haven't started yet, you have some work to do, and if you have started and are done, good for you. Then you're in a good place. So why are we talking about this, right? It's because Windows 10 only have 365 days left to live. And it's time. The only big difference now is that Microsoft has increased the hardware requirements, which actually is the biggest factor we see after the pandemics. But we'll come to that later on as well in the presentation. But Windows 10 only have 365 days left of support today. And if we look at some history, the first release was 1507, and then there's a pretty many releases of Windows 10, that's for sure. And I assume some of you in this meeting have all of these in your environment, or at least many of them in your environment still, because that's what we normally see. That sounds like 1 or 2 machines somewhere doing a specific task that are still on an old version. I like the code names, Threshold, Redstone, then 19H1. That's kind of more boring, but still, it does the job, right? Enablement packages. This was a huge improvement to us all, especially in the end user experience, when we actually only could just flip a switch, basically, because the new version build was included in the latest cumulative updates that was already installed on the device. So basically, the enablement package simply just enabled the new version. In many cases, no new features at all. In some, 1 feature, 2 features maybe, but very, very small changes. The reason for that was that they share the same code base, right? So if we go back to the list here, we can see that this is the same code base, and that was when it was invented as well. But look at the bright side. Windows 11 then, in a green field of nice sunshine, with all the new great features and great stuff we have, right? So it's time to upgrade. How do we upgrade? This is actually something we talked about a lot if we look into somewhat retrospective as well. When we did this to start with, when going from Windows 7 to Windows 10, we used task sequencing configuration manager, nearly all of us. And the reason for that was that we needed to upgrade BIOS, drivers, firmware, because we didn't do that at that time. We're talking 9 years ago or 8 or something. It also gives us full control of everything. We did BIOS updates, rebooted, and everything as well. The only downside is that it's a lot of work. We ran a test sequence before to see that if it actually was blocked, and then we put it in another collection. And we had a long end user downtime where the upgrade was in the foreground in the face of the user and they were non-productive, right? Then we tried to move to configuration manager servicing, which is still great as well. It does a lot of things in the background. We can use setup config.ini or success.cmd to do customization still, so we are still in control somewhat at least. It uses dynamic updates to solve a lot of the driver problems, uninstall applications automatically. So the first thing it does, it actually updates even the setup engine if there's a new version that handles new blocks and everything. So it gives us less user downtime. The problem is that when we started using this, computers was quite slow. Not all machines have SSD already. So the end user was kind of not productive anyway because the machine was so extremely slow. But that's not the case today. And basically now that we moved to Intune and Windows Update for Business or Autopatch, it's a risk-based approach. We see the risk is really small. Because I mean, if we roll this out on like 2,000 devices, maybe we see one device doing a rollback because all the appraiser information and all the compatibility information will block that, so the end user is never affected at all. So it's a much smoother experience nowadays, which is a lot of less work for us in IT, but it also gives a lot less user downtime, of course, as many of the work is done in the background. Like 2/3 is done in the background. And it's also a difference here because now, with the new world we live in, at least most of us do driver updates, firmware updates, BIOS updates as a security measurement as well every month. So it's not a big deal so we don't have to do that now because we should already be on the latest versions as well. Otherwise, there's another risk included, right? So we'll talk about how we can get there, how we can eliminate the need of doing the other things, and try to make it as smooth ride as possible. And again, back to this, I've done blog posts about this many times. The task sequence gives us amazing control. The only downside is that it's in the face of the end user. If we look at servicing on a half modern machine at least, the user downtime is really short. And that's actually really important in the world we live in as well. And if, as I said, if we remove BIOS firmware driver updates, because we do that already from a security perspective, this is a much better approach, we think at least. So I've done polls as well. This is kind of interesting that it's the same result. Maybe it's the same people responding. So it's 1 year between these two little polls I did on X, where we can see that Intune feature updates, I assume maybe it was a bad question, but Intune feature updates and Windows Update for Business should be basically the same, I assume. Configuration Manager is still around for many anyway. And then we have a low percentage of using WVSys as well, which is, yeah, it works, but you have less control, of course, and reporting. But never mind, it still works. So we're still getting there. That's the most important thing. But it hasn't changed much in a year, but many have moved to Intune instead. That's for sure. So what about the hardware requirement, Niklas? Why are they there? Is it just because we want to sell more hardware, or why?
Yeah, exactly. So about the hardware requirements, I'm sure a lot of you have run into these at some point. We do see that, I mean, the RAM usage, it's not that bad, right? 4 gigs of RAM, most devices should have that already available. Disk space, 64 gigabytes, and CPU as well, not much at all, to be honest. But then we have the more challenging parts, I guess. So Swift and firmware are actually a specific level of firmware for UEFI and TPM even. But we need to make sure it's up to date and running, latest functioning versions of firmware, of course. And secure boot, we do want to enable that one as well. We will need that for all the security features and all that stuff that Windows 11 will bring into life. Because to
Seems
me,
that you're not sharing anything, Niklas.
I'm not sharing.
No.
Okay. Let me sharing my screen.
Now we see something.
Yeah,
Yes.
so this one should be the one. Okay,
Thank you.
good. Thank you, Jürgen. So, and we have a TPM as well. TPM 2.0 is what we want to have with us before we do the upgrade to Windows 11 or install Windows 11 even. And we are actually going to get a note that if we run into a hardware requirement block, let's say our device actually do have TPM 2.0, but for some reason we did enable 1.2 back in the days when we installed the device, because we have seen that quite a few times. Then we will get the note that, hey, we need to, you can't upgrade this device due to the reason, and then it will tell us what hardware requirement that is actually blocking us, which is great, right? But that's just when we do one by one. And what if we do this, I mean, in our environments with multiple devices? So one of my favorite reports is actually part of the endpoint analytics within Intune. And we can actually see here that in purple, we see how the device is managed. Is it managed by a configuration manager? Is it co-managed? And of course, if we're using Intune only, it would say Intune in the managed by column. And then in green, we can see, okay, what's the hardware requirement status? Is our specific device capable to upgrading to Windows 11, or do we need to do something? If it says unknown, that usually means that the device has been not been online to send telemetry, or telemetry data policy is not configured correctly. So that's just something to consider here. Don't filter those out, because it could be another problem further down the road, or before actually we get our data here. So definitely check into those as well. And of course, upgraded, and what we probably want to check is the not capable status. And if you have a look at the first one here at the top, it says not capable, and then in the yellow or orange-ish column, we can see why. What's the actual blocker here? Why is this device not considered as capable of upgrading? And if it's firmware or TPM, there is a chance that you just need to upgrade firmware to actually get it going. We need to upgrade UEFI or BIOS, or we need to upgrade TPM firmware, and then we could actually get it into a capable state, which is great, because that means we don't need to exchange or replace the device, right? And so we can save money, of course. And the most common reason for a device not being capable is due to TPM or lack of TPM 2.0, or the CPU family is too old, like early Intel i5, i7, those will not be supported. But Microsoft does actually, on a pretty regular basis, add to the supported list. So just because a specific CPU family is not capable or supported today. We have actually seen that they do add support over time here, which is great, of course. So if we jump into the Intune portal, I just wanted to show you where to find this report. So within the Intune portal, we click on reports, endpoint analytics, take some time. We'll do work from anywhere. And within Windows, here we have this the report which I just showed you. And as you can see here, my devices in my little demo environment, they are already upgraded. So nothing too much to show other than where to find it, of course. So definitely do use this one as the early, when you start calculating budgets and how to actually get there when you lay the strategy for Windows 11, definitely use this report or this list here as a starting point. And just a last thing here with this one is that if you add a filter and click on the Windows 11 readiness status, we can actually filter down on, okay, just show me devices that are not capable, because that's probably where we want to focus, right? And obviously this list is going to be empty for me, but in a much bigger environment, there could be, chances are that there would be some not capable devices here. So Jürgen, back to you.
Yeah, so what if we troubleshoot these things when we want to make sure that secure boot is turned on, if that's the problem, for example. We see that as well, that there's been problem with secure boot and service desk or the technicians have turned it off. So basically the information that Niklas showed you is actually available in the registry, in this registry key. We have all the different versions I can upgrade my Windows 10 device to. So here I can see if I want to go to this release, we can see here that I'm currently on this is the destination build in this case. So that's Windows 11 23H2, and we can see down here if there's any blocker, it's green, there's no other problem. So if it would say secure boot or TPM as a red reason in this case, otherwise it can be installed apps, for example, or drivers, then it's normally orange. So here we can select whatever we want. So if we want to look at 26100, which is Windows 11 24H2, we can actually see that this is green as well. So that's what we do. And as Niklas said, this is built by the appraiser, which runs once a day on all devices. And we can trigger it. So if I turn on secure boot and I want to see that it actually changes the value, I can just run this task, and it will actually, not with that user, it will actually run the appraiser task again, and then it will say that, then it will update the registry information. And as for unknown, as Niklas said, that's what we see most there is basically where telemetry or the appraiser can't contact Microsoft and report the information or get the information back if it's compatible or not. So that we need to make sure that we have internet access for system context. So if we have proxies, that's correctly configured and allowed and all that stuff. So we actually get this information. We can also see this information in Configuration Manager if we're still using Configuration Manager, or as it's actually in the registry, you can just write your own script, just collect those registry values, and you have your own readiness report basically based on the telemetry and the information the device gets back from Microsoft. So it's actually really, really, really good information as well. But it also updates that database every night. So it also means that you need to be running the latest version of the Windows 11 media to do the upgrade. So if you're using task sequence, you need to update the installation media or allow dynamic updates again, otherwise it won't. You probably could fail still. So Windows 11 is the best version of Windows 10 that's released so far. This is what we are seeing at least. Application compatibility is basically not an issue anymore. The only issue that's related to that is that many customers transition to autopilot and Entra join devices at the same time. and there can be some differences and challenges and application compatibilities. Hardware requirements is the biggest challenge we see now. Many organizations, small, large, is still suffering from post-COVID, both investment stops, but maybe delivery, supply chain challenges that we had at that time as well. Certification requirements for software like CE certification for medical, same for many different areas of manufacturing and so on, where we still need the certifications to be in place, even if the applications work, right? Drivers and firmware not updated in years. That's also something we see. Um, but that should be done by in the world we live in now. We should do that already, so it shouldn't be a challenge, but we still see it. As I said before, in local support, turning off a secure boot and all that stuff as well. So we can do remediations of that to make sure that it works as well. So that's what we see today, but Windows 11, sorry, is actually Windows 10 if we look in the registry. So it's still Windows 10 Enterprise. It's still release ID 2009 because Microsoft decided to freeze those registry values in time there. Even if we can see that my machine here is running 23H2, it says Windows 10 Enterprise still. And that's because for application compatibility, basically. So that if there's an application looking at those values, it will still think it's Windows 10. So we don't mess it up just for a registry value information. So that's actually a really good decision Microsoft took there, I must say.
It's almost like a Windows 10 service pack, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And safeguard holds. Every time there's a new version released, there's a long discussion that I can't upgrade because I've been safeguarded and then I want to upgrade now. Yes, maybe you do, but there's a reason for safeguard holds, right? Safeguard holds is probably the best thing that Microsoft invented in my perspective, because we can just, if we use Intune, we can basically just deploy the upgrade. If it detects a safeguard hold using the information we just saw, and Niklas will show that later, it will never try to upgrade a machine, so there's like no risk. And the safeguard hold is also to make sure that we're not putting the end user in a state where they're not productive. So even if it should start, and if you do this manually using Configuration Manager, the setup will fail because there's a safeguard hold. Gary Block has a great blog post on information on safeguard holds, and it will look like something like this in the registry value I showed before. So we'll upgrade experience red because there's a safeguard hold that will block us. In this case, it's TPM. In this case, it's a blocking app up here, right? And there's a great sample script and GitHub repository with error codes. Microsoft maybe should provide that for us, but they're not right now. So there's a community initiative to do that. But normally it's if we Google it, or if we look that up in that database, or if we look in the appraiser database on the machine, we can normally see what the error code is, right? So we can actually see that the gated block is either, in this case, a driver, print driver. Normally, Microsoft will solve this over time as well. So they will go over to orange. Orange means that, yes, we will upgrade your machine, but we will throw away the driver that doesn't work. If it's a print driver or PDF writer or whatever it's been in the history. So they will make the upgrade successful, but you will lose a driver, scanner driver, scanner software, or something like that. So you still need to have a look at the orange ones. Drivers and firmware updates, as we said. Many are moving to co-manage now, if we're still on premise and haven't moved to Entra join. Moving the drivers and firmware up workload is great because we get drivers and firmware from Windows Update. They're encapsulated, so they will not trigger In some rare cases, maybe they do, but they shouldn't trigger any BitLocker recovery. They won't suspend BitLocker either, like many of the vendors' tool. If we use HP Support Assistant, for example, it will also pause BitLocker, so you will become non-compliant until you reboot and all that stuff. So it's the smoothest way of doing everything. Is the latest drivers there? Yeah, maybe they are, but you maybe need to enable them yourself. To get this to work in a good way, there's a new upgrade. There's a null update to configuration manager client where they actually will ignore these. The configuration manager policy will not configure any of these 4 policies anymore, so you can point them where you want. We could do that with group policies before, but it didn't honor that, so it was a conflict. So it was going back and forth. So in theory, we don't have to do co-managed even. We can just say that we want to do drivers from internet or from Windows Update, but then we don't get the same control either, of course. But it's still possible to do it if we like. So basically, it's these 4, and if we look here, these 4 are not configured anymore. So take that into account if you're still using Configuration Manager. So how do we do drivers and firmware updates in Intune, Niklas?
Yeah. So now I am sharing. Right.
That's
Jörgen.
correct. Yes.
Nice. Second try. So within Intune, as a first step before we start upgrading our devices to Windows 11, I would really like to see that we start using the feature called drivers and firmware management, I think it's called, or it is called, and just make sure that we are in a good place in terms of, those blockers we just saw, the hardware requirements. TPM firmware could be too low, or we could use this to, I have actually kind of used this to create list of devices running TPM 1.2, but do have the, possibility to run 2.0 as well. So there are some soft values here as well. But first one, definitely start looking at upgrading BIOS and firmware updates before upgrading to Windows 11, because it might mean that you don't have to or need to replace a computer, and that saves money, right? But good to know as well in terms of drivers and firmware updates with Intune or the auto patch is that the pause for these doesn't happen immediately. So if you push a firmware update and stuff happened, it could be related to what do I know? Screen starting to flicker, blue screen of death. What else? Docking stations that stop working for some reason. Then you want to pause it, right? Because we don't want to push it anymore once we get that kind of feedback for our updates. So we want to pause it, but that doesn't happen immediately because Intune will tell the device to, okay, you're supposed to pause, but Windows Update is actually, the owner of this service or feature. So once the Windows Update scans, it's actually going to get the memo that, hey, these patches or firmware or drivers are not supposed to be installed because we want to pause them. So please create those good pilot rings, test this thoroughly before, clicking the button, of course. So nothing has changed in that regard, I guess, because we need to always, test things out, of course. But once you have done that, definitely push it to as many devices as possible because you're going to be in a good place in terms of being able to upgrade to Windows 11. Another thing I want to point out as well is that because OEMs, as in what I know, Lenovo, HP, Microsoft, Dell, and other as well, they are allowed to add drivers to the repository for this. So once they do, it's actually going to be pretty hard to, plan the reboot. So it usually, in my experience, this means that you could calculate one more additional reboot per month, due to us being able to or doing these drivers and firmware updates, because it doesn't honor it doesn't apply or install those drivers at the same time as they do Windows updates, right? So that's something to think about as well. And if we want to remove a bad driver or a bad firmware, we need to use PowerShell to do so. So that's something to that we should have available to us, right? So we need to create those scripts before we start testing this, because otherwise we would need to create them when or if something breaks, right? So it's always a good practice to actually do this before. So just in case we do actually need them, we will have them closely available so we can uninstall a device, a driver from a device using PowerShell. Hopefully we will see some support natively from the Intune portal for this, but what we have right now is PowerShell. And if you are using BIOS passwords, which I hope that you do, those will actually not be a problem in this case, because there is a built-in Windows mechanisms that will take care of this for us. And as we can see, so for my last point, there is no way to see those applicable devices in the portal. So let's say you have a driver in front of you, and you want to know, okay, it's applicable to a set of devices called audiences within the portal. How do we actually see which those devices are? I want to know, not just the figure, I want to know which they are, right? So just to kind of point this one out, here I have a couple of firmware and driver and firmware update policies within my environment. So if I click one of them, and if I click on recommended drivers, I can see that applicable devices 1, but I am not able to click it. And we will actually need to use graph for this. We need to do some graph queries to see which devices are actually being, in need of this a specific driver. And to me, it feels like, or I'm pretty sure that the plan here is we need to build some kind of logic and application for this by ourselves, just to manage this in the best way possible. Microsoft has released a kind of a template that we can use, so definitely check that out. They did release it quite some time ago, and there are some really good community tools for this as well out there. So definitely check it out. Yeah, and there is this programmatic controls for drivers and firmware. If you do Google or Bing that, you will see some examples on how to get going with such an application, if you want to learn more. So, Jörgen, how do we customize this or add customization during in-place upgrade?
Yes, we still want to do the modern features, as we said, or at least I do for most scenarios. There are still scenarios where we maybe need to upgrade something in-house that Microsoft can't do for us, or a driver, or whatever we want to do. Basically, we have two options. We have the old file called setup.config.ini, which we can copy to the drive, or we can use the more modern option, which was introduced in 4 years ago or something, so it's not that modern, where we can use success.cmd, so it will actually run commands after it's successful. So these are basically the two options we have. We can do this list ones, we can do run or run once. For example, when Microsoft were adding personal teams to Windows 11 and to all the insider builds, I used this one a lot to put it as run and always remove personal teams because it's not supposed to be there, in my opinion. But basically, we can do setup config.ini. We can do whatever we like. We can actually also make sure that how it actually works, the whole setup experience as well. And then we just add it. So we just create the package, either deploy it for configuration manager or Intune, doesn't matter as long as it's there. It's honored by the setup.exe and the setup process of Windows 11 and Windows 10 for that matter as well, as I said. And then for the new ones, with basically success.cmd, we just create the grid as we you can see down here, and then we just put the success.cmd in there, and then we can run whatever we like, replace wallpapers, remove apps, start taskbar customizations, whatever we want to do, install drivers or whatever it's your favorite to do or what you need to do, right? So we are still in control, which is important in many scenarios, but we still can enjoy the more modern way of doing stuff. So what's the risk-based approach then, Niklas?
Yep. So I'm just gonna steal the presentation back here.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so risk-based approach. Well, we did mention earlier that we have a really good app compatibility. But one thing I would like to mention or point out is that we should still honor the life cycle of a device of an app. So before you do, push the upgrade package to other devices, it's always a really good practice to update any installed apps as well. Not only drivers and Windows needs to honor their life cycle. We need to do the same for applications. So definitely do that if you have an old, 7-zip version, update it, and it's going to be, an easier ride to get to Windows 11. And we need to do that for all apps. But in terms of the risk-based approach, we can't test everything. It's really hard. And due to the app compatibility percentage as 99.x, it's a different figure depending on who you ask. We see probably around 99.8, I guess, Jürgen, when we do this, but still, and that kind of means that we don't necessarily need to test everything because chances are pretty good that it's going to work anyway. So we need to identify our most critical apps and systems, and we need to focus on those. And so I guess 1 to 10 is probably a lot. I would probably say 3 to 5 for a regular organization to focus upon. But still, that is where we should pay our attention. And we do need to test, but always trust our OEM because they know our devices the best. We need to test, of course, drivers and firmware, but still at some point we need to trust that if our manufacturers tells us that the driver is going to work, it's supposed to work, and we need to trust that. So probably test in some small pilot groups and so on, as per usual, of course. And don't don't wait too long with getting to get going with this because there we have 365 days, but that's when our last Windows 10 device should be running Windows 11. In 1 year we should have 0 in the best of worlds, of course, but still that's our goal. That must be our goal. So we need to start doing testing and to solve those critical findings as soon as possible. And when you have done so, maybe you should start rolling this out gradually already. I mean, it's 1 year. It could feel like it's a lot of time, but it's not, especially not if we start spending time on getting to Windows 11 too late. So, but with gradual rollout, we could actually, find our easy picks and update those and get some good feedback I guess, harder devices to upgrade to get started, because we need to get the word out there. Users will need to get to know the new operating system, or the new, where is my icons? Why is the start menu slightly different, and taskbar is in the middle? Am I running a Mac OS? No, you're not. This is Windows 11. There will be some those kind of questions and challenges, I guess, that we need to help our users adapt to. So definitely start rolling this out as soon as possible. And to do so, I would like to highlight my absolute favorite report within Intune. The one I did show you earlier was for the hardware requirements, but this one is for safeguard holds and risk. We are talking about risk, and I mean, it doesn't get much better than this one. And as you can see, if you have an example for the first Epson scan, so this is an application, and as you can see for the issue, we could see what will happen if I upgrade. If I try to upgrade, is it for the safeguard hold? Is it like a hard block, or is it like an orange where it's going to upgrade, but something could be removed or something? And in this case, for the first one, we can see that it is actually an orange block, and the application will be removed during upgrade to Windows 11. So it's not going to block the device from upgrading. So we could actually use this report to identify our risks, and these risks right here are from an environment with about 2,500 devices, and we just have these 14 potential blockers. It's pretty great, and we will find this report within reports in the Intune portal. Click on Windows Updates, click on Reports, and you will have it here. Windows Feature Update, Compatibility Risks Report. It's a tongue twister, so I'm happy I don't have to say that one too often. But here it is, and definitely go check it out. Use it early on before you start rolling this out, of course, and you will be in a good place. And I did talk about gradual rollout, and one of the first things I want to point out, or probably one of the most important things, I guess, is that we can actually make Windows 11 available to users right now. So by using Windows updates and feature updates, we can actually go ahead and give the user the possibility to install Windows 11 if he or she wants to, right? So let's have a look at what that looks like. So I'll click on Windows feature updates. I'll just go ahead and create a new policy. I'm not going to be the quickest writer, I guess, but we'll give it a name, Windows feature update. Excellent cursor placement as well. Windows 11 feature update available. That's the name. And then we need to decide or choose or pick our Windows version. For this one, we're going to use 24H2 because that's the latest one. And then we can decide if it's going to be a required update, like install mandatory, or just make it available. And for the end user experience, it's going to look like this. So once we have pushed this to a device, our user just need to head over to Windows Update, and there it is. So we could just use this to kind of make the user aware somehow that, hey, Windows 11 is available, and this is how you get started. This is how you upgrade to Windows 11 when you have the time to do so. Because at one point in time, we will actually need to do this as a required update, right? But if and that could mean that we interrupt a meeting and so on and so forth. So if a user know that he or she has some time available for the rest of the after lunch or something, then just let them know how to do this and yeah, get going with it. But if that doesn't work, Jürgen, what possibilities do we have as a last resort?
One
For
of our
upgrading.
last resorts is to use the Windows 11 installation assistant. It has actually proved to solve the last couple of percentage of machines. Could be problems with Windows Update or anything else that blocks this otherwise, but this has been a good companion for us to chase the last couple of percent in. Either it can be run manually by on-site admin or we can script it. It's not doesn't make any sense to show the restart UI as it will be shown in the wrong context and not the user context. But the reboot is something that you need to inform everyone about. But it has actually solved the last percentage, as we said. So it's not a bad idea. Running it through Intune Configuration Manager, script, whatever you like, basically, and solve the last percentage out there. Talking about that, customizations in Windows 11. I've done a lot of customizations before, so we put together this one little evolution of customizations. So basically, when Windows 10 came, we started importing default start menu, we uninstalled apps, and we did a lot of registry hacks to get it to work. Then in 15.11, we got my favorite, which is the partially controlled start menu. And we continue to uninstalling apps. And then Windows 11 came. We started, if we haven't before, moving to the cloud for real. We have, well, no, but we can control the start menu, but it's all or nothing. So it's not a good fit for everyone. And uninstalling apps is also a question if we should or we should not. And Microsoft has done this quite interesting as well. So if we look here, we have a Windows 10 22H2. And if we look at the start menu, now I've installed some stuff, but it's still a lot of applications in the list, right? So it doesn't look that nice either. And there's a lot of mess in there. If we look at the Windows 11 machine, it's quite nicer. There's not that much in there, like Power Automate isn't here. Or wait, is it? So what's happening now is that there's applications in there which are not listed in the start menu anymore, but they're still installed anyway. So basically, when everyone says, "Oh, there's no difference, we don't have to do that anymore because it's not that much included," it's actually is about the same included, even if it's not more. The only thing is that we don't see it in the same annoying way anymore. So that's probably one of the reasons. But if we should uninstall apps or not, that's a good question. From my perspective, I think it's more important to work with device personas. So what's for shared devices, for multi-app kiosk devices, which many of the shared devices actually should be, because many of the shared computers, they should only run a couple of apps. Then they should be locked down as well, and then the built-in stuff doesn't make any sense to have in there. For the specialized devices or the single purpose devices or whatever we want to call them, they should have a control start menu and experience and uninstall all the stuff that never ever will be used as well. But for a normal admin computer, maybe it's not that important to uninstall apps anymore. And the only thing, if we work in an environment where we have very, very, very poor bandwidth still, which is an issue for some countries, some of these applications are quite big just to update in the background for no one to ever use them. So that could be a driver still as well. So it's still something we need to design and think of as well. So when we talk about uninstalling apps, Niklas, is there anything we still should uninstall on all machines?
Yes, if you ask me, yeah, definitely. Quick Assist would be one of those because I mean we have been using it for quite some time and we do like it, but I think it's time that we remove it, and the reason for that is due to our uh, threat actors, I guess. Bad actors out there, they have learned how to actually use this against our users and even for home users and as well. They of course they do allow you to sign in with a Microsoft account as well, so it doesn't even have to be a work account. So that's one you know one risk in itself. So we need to block that if we're going to use it. There are no logging and security is basically zero to be honest. With Quick Assist, it does use and relay traffic through the Microsoft servers for this, and so I would like to spend some time on, okay, what's the actual risk here, other than allowing users to sign in with Microsoft account. We have seen people, users, getting call or receive call, and social engineering attacks called vishing. Sorry, a lot of ishing going on. So we have quishing, phishing, vishing, probably even more. But basically, what they do, they will find a user and they will spam that mailbox, that user's mailbox. They will send a lot of mails from different mail services, and then they will call the user, say, hey, we are from the IT department. We are getting indication that you might have received a lot of emails. And you say, yeah, hey, that is really bad. Could you help me, please? And of course, they are happy to help, and they will ask the user to click Control Windows Q. If you aren't sure whether you have a Quick Assist on your device, feel free to click that combination, Control Windows and Q button. And if you have it, it's going to open Quick Assist. And then they will tell the user how to proceed from there. They will give the user their security code, and then ask the user to approve full control, and then they have all the possibilities to start downloading stuff, to initiate even ransomware attacks from that device. So and there is a good article written by Microsoft security team on this as well, called Threat Actors Misusing Quick Assist in, yeah, you just Google that and you'll find it. And I mean, it's definitely a risk to me. This one needs to go.
Yes, totally agree. And we can simply do a deploy and uninstall of it through Intune or whatever we like to do instead of scripting if we don't like. So there's many possibilities, but it still has to go. So there's always some adjustment we need to do to the operating system to make it a secure enterprise operating system, if we put it that way.
Yes.
So what's new in Windows 11 24H2 then? Well, pretty short. To upgrade, there's actually new requirements. We need to be on a half new Windows 10 release. But if we're going for Windows 11, we actually have to be on the May cumulative update to be able to do an upgrade of it. And that's still, even if it's not an enablement package, it is a full in-place upgrade, independent on where you come from. And that's because it's the whole new kernel base and the whole new version build. And for availability, we call it availability. Intune, as Niklas said, is ready now. Configuration Manager, it's in there in servicing and it works. I just tested it this weekend. It works fine. The only downside is that Configuration Manager won't have any official support for 24H2 or Server 2025 until the next release of Configuration Manager, which will probably be in December. Everything seems to be working, but if we want official support, we still have to wait a bit. So there's a lot of new features in Windows 11 24H2. Our favorite ones are bold here, but it's hard to see. But it's Windows Local Admin Password Solution improvements that Niklas will show us as the last thing we do before we're done. And also we have the LSA protection. That's actually, even if you upgrade a machine for the first time, they've chosen this approach. So if you upgrade your machine, it will actually audit if there's an LSA compatibility issue on the device and for an amount of time. And then if there's not, it will actually turn on the protection automatically for you. And that's really, really cool as well. It's hard to demo and hard to show, as it's maybe in the log files. So it's easier to show Windows Labs, Niklas, and talk about that.
Yeah. So Windows Labs, it's been around for quite some time already, but there are some caveats by using the current policies that we have available to us from the Intune portal. The first one is that we do actually need to complement those Windows Labs policies with other policies to actually enable the Windows Labs account, should it be the built-in admin password, or if you want to create a new one. But coming up, we will actually have the possibility to just do all this from the Windows Labs policy directly. And as you can see to the left here, the password for user WLabs and a random name, we could actually randomize the name at the same time we rotate the password for the device. So the name will actually be managed and by Windows Labs, and it's going to be randomized and updated on a regular basis. So that's a slight improvement, definitely. And for if you have run into same thing as I have done for quite a few times, it's hard to remember the password. Definitely, it could be hard to see capital O and zero looks the same, and so on. So they have actually, as you can see here on the right side, they have done a good job to add passphrases for us. So it's not a password per se; it's a passphrase, easier for us to remember when we need to type it, I guess. So eject, flyer, goal, button, curse, heap. You could almost make a song out of it and make it easier to remember when you need to type it. So that's something to look forward to. Windows 24 H2 have these capabilities, but we haven't seen the policy for Windows Labs being updated yet. So we need to use CSP policies if we want to use this right away. But should come up here in an hopefully in really close time.
Perfect.
So,
and with that, we have 1 minute left. So to sum it up, application compatibility is an issue we hardly see anymore. Hardware support is the big challenge, as we still have effects from the pandemics. Software certification is always a challenge if we're working with vendors that are slow. Update drivers and firmware is a success factor and a security factor as well, which should be done already.
definitely.
Make sure hardware is correctly configured with secure boot being turned off and so on. If we use compliance policies in Intune, they will become non-compliant, so then we'll find them out immediately, and then that's not an issue. If we come from a hybrid world where we don't measure things like that, then it's harder to see. And configure the default Windows 11 user experience according to the scenario or the persona or the device ownership or the device purpose as needed. That's basically what we want you to take with you from this hour. And with that, we are past to 1 minute past.
Almost.
Almost made it. So
almost made it.
Well, thank you very much for listening to us for an hour, and have a great rest of the day. If there's any questions, just put them in the Q&A. Otherwise, you know where to find us. Have a great day. And thank you, Niklas, for great work.
Thank you.
As always.
Thank you, everyone.